Good morning. Welcome to episode 88 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined, as I am each and every Tuesday, by Hays Carlyon, which you can catch on the Frangie Show each weekday on 92.5 FM radio and 1010XL, 4 to 6 p.m. Hays also contributes to a lot of our blogs on the 1010XL.com website, 1010XL.com/Jaguars. It's where you can find his written work. Hays is also one of our contributors for the 1010XL second annual draft guide. So really excited for that project to be fully released as a PDF for free for everyone later this month. We'll have a lot of prospect rankings, a lot of kind of roundtable questions. It'll be packed with information specifically for Jaguars fans. Also, apologies for being late. I think we started today at 9:06, maybe even 9:07. Said 9:04, so hand up, that was my fault. But with all that out of the way, Hays, welcome back to the show. How's it going?
Good morning, Gus. Great to be with you again.
Yeah, same goes as always. Today, Hays and I are going to talk about Jaguars' positional needs, and I kind of framed this as under the radar roster needs. But really, I think that we need to discuss or what I want to discuss is needs that go beyond defensive line, because the Jaguars, as we all know, signed 9 free agents last week in the beginning of 2025 free agency. They definitely addressed some positions of need, but one position they did not address is defensive line. James Gladstone did say in a press conference last week that he wants, or the team wants, to be able to give rookies a chance to play snaps immediately, not just make the roster, but actually contribute from day one as rookies. And so we assume that defensive line will be addressed in the draft, and maybe even in like the second and third waves of free agency. And so, Hays, do you agree with me? And I guess what I assume is the consensus in Jacksonville that like defensive line at this point, after the first wave of free agency, is clear, far and away the biggest need for the Jaguars.
I would. I mean, I think, in looking at it, the market still isn't bad. I think it edge. If that was something that they wanted to take a peek at. But to your point, James Gladstone made it pretty clear that, he doesn't want to sign a veteran and then clog up sort of the route to playing time for the prospects they'll be selecting in the draft. So, yeah, I mean, I think, I'm assuming, they're hoping Mason Graham is there at 5. So that is sort of your massive interior defensive line addition. And then in that, high second round, certainly one of the 2 third-rounders, you would think might be somebody that can help edge and be, the first guy up when Hays Carlyon or Walker needs a break. So, yeah, I would think that 2 pretty high picks are coming there, and that's how they'll go about addressing that position this offseason. But I will say, I mean, I think you look at the names that are still out there, and probably most of those guys will be – it was sort of like that last year, and a lot of those guys ended up being available post-draft. So, if you're the Jaguars, maybe you wait it out. We're not that far from the draft now, and we're certainly beyond the first wave of free agency. So the veterans that are still on the market, pretty good chance that, 90% of them are probably still going to be on the market once you get beyond the draft. So it makes sense, see what the draft brings you. And then if for whatever reason, they ended up going in a different path and had great value elsewhere, then maybe you can circle back. It'd probably be hard at interior defensive line to get massive help. But but certainly on the edge, there's several, veterans that have at least had a good NFL career. How much is left in the gas tank is unknown, but they're players for still being available, that they would be attractive. Again, though, and this may play a role into it as well in terms of Gladstone's thinking. It's hard to sign a veteran free agent that's had a nice NFL career and then tell him, okay, you're not a starter. You're behind Trayvon Walker and Josh Hays Carlyon. So, again, for some of those veterans, those conversations, those guys may be, more wanting to sign later, right towards the start of training camp, hoping that a starting job will open up for them, because that's not going to exist here.
Yeah, definitely good points. I think Calais Campbell is obviously the big name that sticks out at defensive tackle in terms of still available free agents. But as you're saying, the list for edge defenders especially is pretty deep. A couple of names that are still out there: Matthew Judon, Zadarius Smith, Von Miller, Emmanuel Ogba, Preston Smith, DeMarcus Walker, Carl Lawson, Dwayne Smoot, our old friend. So definitely, whether before or even probably likely or after the draft, they can address that room with a veteran presence. But it'll be interesting to see like how many swings and kind of where they take the swings in the draft in terms of that position group. I actually think that kind of an underrated or under the radar need for the Jaguars is within the defensive line, because everyone knows that they need more pass rush juice behind everyone not named Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines Allen. But I think that Devon Hamilton, I was a really big fan of his game at the beginning of his career, but unfortunately he had that tough back injury a couple off seasons ago and hasn't really looked the same. And so I think that certainly you want some pass rush juice along that defensive line, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the Jaguars try to find like a long-term replacement at nose tackle, like as a true two-down run stuffer to replace Devon Hamilton potentially as early as next offseason. So Hays, moving past the defensive line, what's not necessarily like the next biggest need for the Jaguars, but what's an under the radar need that you think the Jags should address in April in the draft?
When I hear like underrated need, that to me, that's like, okay, well, where do you think they might go in like the third, fourth round that would not surprise us, but maybe be a slight surprise. And, I would say running back. It's an unbelievable crop, according to the experts this year at the running back position, incredibly deep. You've got 2 fourth-round picks. So I think the Jaguars could even wait it out and, use the 5th overall, the high second, the 2/3 on, trench players, get a couple defensive linemen, get an offensive interior to push Ezra Cleveland out of left guard and add to that receiver position. I would say those are primary needs at this point. But, I think you look at that running back spot and, that could be pretty enticing, particularly with that, 2nd, 4th round selection. I would imagine there's still going to be some really good value at the running back position, and we saw what a job Liam Cohen did last year in Tampa Bay with Bucky Irving and with that ground game with the Buccaneers. And I just don't know that, that Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby are going to be exactly what this group is looking for. Etienne may not be long for the Jaguars anyway. This may be his last year on the team. And, and Tank Bigsby had a better second year, but has been inconsistent at times. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gladstone and Cohen identify a running back that they feel like has a great cohesiveness with his skill set to how they like to attack. And they go ahead and pull the trigger on a running back, maybe higher than some people think.
Yeah, I think the running back class and the tight end class are two kind of skill position units in the draft that are going to be very deep. A lot of really good prospects at those positions. And so I wonder if they're going to take a tight end too, but we also kind of know how the Jags feel about their tight end room. Obviously, they released Evan Engram. They brought in Hunter Long and Johnny Munt in free agency, who are certainly more so blockers than pass catchers, but Long especially has a little bit of untapped potential, I think, as a pass catcher. And then at the NFL Combine, James Gladstone had some nice things to say about Brenton Strange. So I think that we can assume that they feel pretty good about the tight end room right now. And if they draft a tight end, I feel like it would almost be because the draft class is so good that, like, why not have a dart throw at that position? But for running back, I think there's a lot less confidence about just like what they think about the room, because even if they do think really highly of like Travis Etienne, he is on the final year of his rookie contract right now. And so they'd potentially be looking for like a long-term replacement for him. But also we can't even assume that the new coaching staff and new regime really likes those two backs. I feel like I haven't heard anything from Cohen or Gladstone or even Tony Pacelli talking about like either one of them as like, yeah, they're going to be a big part of our plans. And so both Gladstone and Cohen have had success with like kind of mid to later round running backs. Gladstone's Rams got Kyron Williams in, I believe, the 5th round at Notre Dame. Last year, Liam Cohen's Buccaneers got Bucky Irving. And I think it was the 4th round. It might have been the 3rd. He came out of Oregon. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see them spend a day two, maybe day three pick on the running back position, especially considering we just don't really know how they feel about the two guys, Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, on the roster right now. So I definitely agree with you. That was running back, I think, was at the top of my list in terms of under the radar needs for the Jaguars. Another one that I have is perimeter cornerback and even like free safety. So like kind of like the outer limbs of the defense. The Jaguars did address their secondary in free agency, but they addressed more so the spine of their defense, the middle of the defense, by bringing in a slot cornerback in Jordan Lewis, who has the versatility to play outside, but I assume he's going to be primarily playing in the slot. And then Eric Murray, I think, has the versatility to, again, play inside and outside, but more realistically, he'll probably be close to the box and in the middle of the field. And so I think that they still need a replacement for Andre Cisco as someone who can feasibly play center fielder for you. And then I think they need to add more depth at outside cornerback too. I think day two would be a really, really, really sweet spot for outside cornerback. There's a lot of prospects that I really like for the Jaguars. Trey Amos from Ole Miss, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, Savon Revel from East Carolina. I think there's a lot of really good corner prospects that you could find in round two, potentially even round three. And so, again, I feel like the Jaguars did address the spine of their defense, really the spine of their secondary, but they need to focus on the outer limbs too, because that'll go a long way towards preventing explosives on defense.
Yeah, I think safety is still a really big need because I think they basically are looking for two, and Eric Murray has solved half the problem, but I still wonder if that starter opposite him is currently on the roster, and I don't think it is. So safety also is I think it's a important need to be filled and ideally in the draft. If it doesn't go the way that they want, they certainly can, explore a veteran that's still on the market. But yeah, I think safety is certainly a priority. It's interesting at corner because I'm assuming the signing of Jordan Lewis means that, and Gladstone kind of said, well, we believe he has position flexibility. So maybe they view Jordan Lewis as the perimeter guy opposite Tyson Campbell, or maybe it's going to be, Jarian Jones, or maybe it's both those guys are just going to purely compete at slot, and and they really have a big void opposite Tyson Campbell. But I'm with you. I would think corner gets addressed pretty early on in this draft. Again, they have 10 picks. You've got 2 in the third, 2 in the fourth. So, I mean, I would think that, I agree. I mean, it could be defensive tackle at 5 and then corner with the high second rounder. And then maybe the third round becomes where you pick up your left guard and, some receiver help, something like that. It'll be interesting to see how they go about it because they do have a lot of picks, which is good. But obviously, you don't want to be counting on 6th, 7th round selections having to come in and play big roles. So Exactly. They do have 10 picks, but they've got more starting needs, I think, than maybe not starting needs, but significant roles like the third edge guy. It's not a starter, but they've got to find that guy. They don't have, in my opinion, an in-house solution there. And just like they didn't have it last year, so it'll be interesting to see, because obviously something's going to have to not get addressed between defensive tackle, corner, receiver, edge help, safety, running back. Yeah. You mentioned tight end, which I absolutely think in a deep draft you'd like to take a player and take advantage of that value. So it's great that they have these picks. It's great that they signed 9 free agents, but there's obviously still a significant amount of work to do. I think for them to feel like they've got a 53 that's balanced and can be not just competitive, but can be a roster that can win a high volume amount of games this season.
For sure. I think for cornerback, even if the Jaguars have the utmost confidence in Jordan Lewis and Jarian Jones being starting caliber players and guys they want on the field for a significant amount of snaps, like Tyson Campbell hasn't really shown the ability to stay healthy for a full season for a couple years now. Jordan Lewis is nearing 30 years old. And so, like, even if you have three guys, that shouldn't prohibit you from continuing to add to that room. I think that I'm certainly more comfortable with Monteric Brown being cornerback 4 as opposed to cornerback 3 with the Jordan Lewis signing. But I think you definitely need to address depth. And as you said, like, I don't think you can really just bank on doing that with 6th and 7th rounders, as Trent Baalke has tried to do in recent years. I really just have one more under the radar positional need. Hays, do you have anything left?
Again, I would say we haven't really talked in great detail about receiver. Obviously, they're really high on De'Ami Brown. That's a deal I wouldn't have done, but we'll see if it works. Hopefully, it does. But not a lot of production that you can fall back on. Obviously, he had a nice postseason. That's great. But it's sort of the same argument that led K'Lavon Chaisson to being a first-round pick here. It was like, well, he had a great playoff. Okay. That's great that he, had a couple good games to finish his career. And he's, to his credit, he's still in the league and, he got another job. But obviously he's not going to live up to the billing. It's a different deal with De'Ami Brown, but it's just a one-year deal. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. They haven't harmed themselves moving forward, but you have harmed yourself if he doesn't really help your team this year. And if he's not ready, if he's not going to blossom the way that they think. So, I mean, it's going to be cool to see if they're right, because if they're right on De'Ami Brown, then what a great acquisition. So I think, in terms of receiver, look, I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a superstar. The league is going to try to counterpunch him this year. Obviously, he's going to be one of the most studied receivers in the league by defensive coaches. I don't think it's going to matter. I think he proved it last year playing with Mac Jones, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram injured, Gabe Davis injured. The last 5 games of the year, every defense knew, that he was the only guy you had to really account for, and no one could stop him. So, now that he's got an off season to really focus in on, playing the position and the nuances. He's not going through the draft process. He's not, training to run at the combine and, training for a pro day and then getting drafted and, moving to a new city and having to learn a new playbook and have new teammates and a new employer. He's so much more settled now. And I think that's going to really show in his play. So I don't think there's going to be, assuming he stays healthy, that's always the caveat you have to throw out there. But I don't think you're going to see his game slow down at all. In fact, my guess is he's going to be even better than what we saw. So he's a star. But beyond Brian Thomas Jr., you don't really know what else. And even in roster construction, let's say they're right about De'Ami Brown. Well, are you going to tag him? I doubt, with the way receiver contracts have skyrocketed, and rightfully so, you're probably not tagging him. So you might not have him. He might have to hit the market. So I think they need to invest in the receiver position. And I think it's got to be, a fairly high pick. And now if a guy's sitting there, high second round, maybe that's where you do it. But I would think, one of the 2 third-round picks could certainly be a receiver. But I think that's an area where they've got to add a fairly significant prospect to that room to feel better about what they have. I don't think Gabe Davis is going to do anything. I think he'll be here this year and then he'll be released. And, Parker Washington has improved, but is it good enough? Is that good enough to win big games? And that's now the prism that I think they're looking through. It's not, can this guy survive in the NFL? Can he be functional in the NFL? It's like, can this guy be a high-level quality player? And, maybe Parker Washington will continue to improve. Maybe this new coaching staff will bring more out of him, and he'll do that. But there's a lot of unknowns. There's too many unknowns for me outside of BTJ to leave that position alone and not touch it with a considerable amount of draft ammo.
Yeah, I think receiver is a great shout. I feel that Brian Thomas is the only like long-term building block in the receiver room right now. And even if you think of Parker Washington that way, like that's only two guys. It seems like unlikely that De'Ami Brown will stay around for a long time. I guess if he has like a mediocre season, then he could stick around on a mediocre contract. But it feels like he'll either not live up to expectations, so then the Jags will just part ways with him next offseason, or he'll exceed expectations and then get a bag elsewhere, and perhaps the Jaguars will be able to get a compensatory pick for that. But De'Ami Brown, Gabe Davis, I agree with you. I certainly don't expect them to be around for the long haul, so the Jaguars certainly need to address that position. And I agree with you where I think that it probably will be a little bit higher than a lot of people suspect, or at least than I previously suspected. I thought that, especially considering the success that James Gladstone and the Rams have had with finding kind of late round receiver gems, I thought that they would be comfortable just waiting around until maybe even day 3 to address that position. But because of what we just said about like the long-term building blocks in the room, I do think the Jaguars are going to take trenches, and more likely defensive trenches, with their first round pick. But I won't completely rule out Ted McMillan, and I think there is a really good chance that they do spend a day 2 pick on receiver. John Shipley, really recommend his work over at SI Jaguars. He's been kind of hinting at that in a couple of different articles, that the Jaguars seem prepared to spend a top 100 pick on a wide receiver. So that's definitely one to look out for. The last one that I had written down.
What'd you make of McMillan's 40? The report yesterday that he ran at his pro day, and some of the times it looked good, and some of the times were like, no. I think it was Breer that was like, no, slow down. It wasn't quite that. But what did you make of the pro day? First off, just that he ran, and would you like him at the 5th pick, particularly if, let's say, only one quarterback goes, so Graham's off the board as well as Hunter?
In terms of the pro day, I think he ran a 4.48 at Arizona's pro day, and I think that like about a 4.5, maybe a 4.51, 4.52 is like about expected. Obviously, pro day numbers are typically a little bit juice, and so if McMillan ran a 4.48, you can probably add on a couple tenths of a second to that. But that was like about what I expected, and so I don't think that it should, like, his 40 time should sway opinions one way or another. In terms of the Jaguars potentially taking him in the first round, I wouldn't be against it. Honestly, I was pretty lukewarm about the Brian Thomas pick when it happened last year, and we saw how that turned out. But I don't think that Ted McMillan is like a Julio Jones type prospect that like should absolutely be a top 5 pick. And I also think that the Jaguars, since they do have Brian Thomas, like, as cool as it would be to like build a receiver room like the Eagles with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, or the Bengals with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, even the Vikings, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. I mean, the list goes on of really good wide receiver tandems in the NFL. But I think that because Brian Thomas is so good, I agree with you that he's just a straight up superstar. I think that it would be not necessarily like a poor allocation of resources, but it comes down to allocation of resources. And I think they would be better off spending those resources along the trenches and kind of following the Howie Roseman model. But what do you think? Are you a big Tet fan?
I mean, I like McMillan, and if that's the direction that they went in, I wouldn't be upset by it, because it would certainly be in makings of an explosive offense, and give Trevor another weapon, which is good. But no, I don't think that's where they're going to go. I think it would have to be some crisis situation where Mason Graham is gone, obviously Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are gone, and you're sitting there saying, well, do we take like a Will Campbell? Do they take the Mimbu, the Missouri tackle? Do you go offensive line there, which is obviously probably a reach, not a crazy reach, but probably a little bit of a reach. Or do you say at that point, well, let's go get somebody that we feel like can score touchdowns for us? Because I do think McMillan, I don't know that he's going to be like a breakaway threat, but I mean, it's hard to argue his frame, his length, his ability to go get the ball. So I do think he'd be a nice compliment for Brian Thomas Jr. I don't think it's going to happen this way because I think Graham is going to be there for them, but it would be it'd be a problem, but I think it'd be at least somewhat of a decent solution to the problem. If you take McMillan at 5, then obviously that high second round pick, you're now really kind of scrambling to get some interior defensive line help probably there. And then you've got your 2 third rounders. So now you're thinking edge and probably your interior offensive line. So it could work, going that direction, but it's not, I think, the best possible scenario. I would think the best possible scenario is Mason Graham is there and you take him and you hope that between Mason Graham and Mason Smith, you've got consistent star power, being able to push the pocket and make things easier for Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker and make life really difficult on, the opposing quarterback.
Yeah, and McMillan, I think it's worth saying that he feels like the perfect type of receiver to play with Trevor Lawrence. I think that the best comparison for him at the NFL level is probably Drake London, just because it's impressive how smooth he is as a route runner, considering his size. He definitely has the versatility to play some slots out of the snaps out of the slot. Excuse me. But yeah, no. I think that T. Higgins is another guy that he's gotten a lot of comparisons to just because of his contested catch ability. And for that reason, he'd be a great fit with Trevor because I think that, especially when you go back and look at how Trevor succeeded at the collegiate level, it was not mostly, but like in a large part of it was because he had such talented receivers to throw to at Clemson and even in his high school days when he won state championships there. And so to have real back shoulder guy, I think it would probably be a good addition for the Jaguars offense. But in terms of under the radar roster needs, just to wrap up, the only other one I had written down was kick returner or just returner, because the Jaguars special teams in general is in really good shape with Logan Cook, the punter, Ross Matisic, the long snapper, both making the Pro Bowl. And I believe maybe the All-Pro too last year. Rookie Cam Little or kicker Cam Little as a rookie last season set a couple franchise records. He seems to be a great long-term guy, hopefully, for the Jaguars at kicker. But even though the Jaguars did take 2 swings at kick returner last year by signing Devin Duvernay and drafting Keelan Robinson on day 3 out of Texas, one of them ended up working out, largely because of injuries. But I think that returner is just the under the radar need that no one's talking about, and understandably so, because it's like a special teams position and not one of the 22 starting positions on the roster. But considering the amount of draft capital that the Jaguars have, I think it would make a lot of sense for them to kind of replicate the Keelan Robinson pick, honestly, and just try to find another just explosive kick returner in special teams on day 3 or so. But that's about it. As we've said multiple times throughout this show, considering the amount of not necessarily positional needs, but as you put it nicely, Hays, the amount of roles that they need filled, it'll certainly be interesting to see how they end up doing that and in what points they ended up doing that at different positions in the NFL draft. So I think that'll do it for today, unless you got anything else, Hays.
No, that's it. Thank you so much, Gus. Always enjoy it.
All right. Same goes, Hays. Appreciate you as always. Appreciate everyone for watching and listening. We'll be back tomorrow at 9:04 a.m. Got Dan Pizzuta, who currently writes for the 33rd team. He's going to be coming on just to talk Jaguars, just giving us a kind of a national perspective, what he thinks about Jacksonville's free agency class and what they should do in the draft and beyond. So 9:04 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. See you guys then.